Hi management students, Dr. Bowen here with another quick lecture on Chapter 8 in our textbook, which covers research, also abbreviated as the RACE acronym, to give us an overview of the public relations strategic management process. The R stands for research, and of course that means data collection. A is for action planning or strategy, C is for communication, and of course E is for evaluation, also a form of research. So let's get into a few definitions from the chapter. There are a lot of definitions in this chapter, and that's why earlier in the semester I mentioned that learning management is almost like learning a foreign language. So here are a few of those key terms I want you to make sure you know. The first is formative versus evaluative research. Formative research begins an initiative, evaluative research wraps it up. So when you're doing formative research, you're forming your definition of the problem and you're forming your campaign or your initiative. Evaluation tells you whether you've hit your goal or not. You may measure outcomes to see if you've accomplished what you needed to. Informal and formal research are the next two definitions. Informal research is any means of data collection that is not a rigorous statistical method or that is used primarily for gathering qualitative data, but in an informal approach rather than a planned and rigorous approach. This may be attending a meeting and taking notes to hear what people are talking about, calling some of your colleagues and asking them what they think of the issue, or simply listening to a podcast dealing with the issue. That's informal research. Formal research is research with a specific planned method of data collection so that it's rigorous and scientific. So you've planned it in advance so you can compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And of course, formal research is a large part of what we do in public relations management. Primary research and secondary research are the next two terms I'd like you to know. Primary research is original data collection, meaning you create the data by generating it through formal or informal research methods. Secondary research is where someone else has already collected the data and publishes it for you to read. So anything in a library, for example, is secondary research. A literature review is comprised of secondary research resources. And original research is primary research, where you're the only one who has access to that data until it's published, of course. And then finally, quantitative and qualitative research are our other two big terms to know. Quantitative research measures quantity of something or how much something is occurring. Oftentimes it reports results in statistical formats or percentages and includes a margin of error, so we'll know how reliable that data is. It normally includes a sample of a certain population as well as demographics to tell us who answered the questionnaire or the survey, which is normally the most common method of gathering quantitative data. The second big form is qualitative data, meaning that we seek a quality of in-depth information that wants to answer why questions or understand how something came to be. So it's the opposite side of the coin from quantitative research that looks at quantity. Qualitative research looks at quality or detailed in-depth information. It can be ethnographies, interviews, observation, or participant observation, looking at texts and complaints from an organization's data files, document research, or focus groups. Focus groups and interviews are the most commonly used in public relations management. So thinking about the ways these research take place, looking at the digital world gives us a couple new things to concern ourselves with. Social media is a tool or a tactic comprised of many different platforms where we can look at source information, influencer information, message transmission and retransmission, and if there's any attempt to persuade or change opinion. Oftentimes, social media does not create engagement. Oftentimes, it is a one-way place to post information rather than a format for dialogue, although that's not always the case. There are many exceptions, of course. The next is big data. Big data is aggregate data that is not used to personally identify people, but is a very, very large data set gained from massive computing resources. Looking at how cancer cells generally transform themselves across every cancer case that we've identified for the last 20 years, for example, is big data. So big data can be used in an aggregate way to inform our research questions, but oftentimes it's only as good as the person writing the question, or the data is so massive that we must know how to interpret it. So for example, we can buy all of the commuter data of people going in and out of a major city every night. That's big data. But how do we use it to address the problems of traffic and pollution? That's a tougher question. And then finally, artificial intelligence generated data is a very interesting, compelling way to get research and data, and it leads to a number of ethical questions as well. Artificial intelligence is using computer algorithms to find specific patterns in the data and look for information that oftentimes machine learning has determined the parameters of the research. Humans sometimes don't even do that. So when you release an algorithm, it creates answers to questions, but we don't know how they got to that point. For some reason or other, it may be a black box. So that gives us some ethical questions with the use of artificial intelligence to identify people for our research, for our communication methods. We don't want to invade their privacy, especially when they may not know that much of the data we have through artificial intelligence is being collected about them all the time. You can use it for very neat things. For example, you can use geo-tracking artificial intelligence data. Geo-tracking AI can send a message to your telephone that pops up a menu when you go to a drive-through line of a fast food restaurant, or when you walk into a mall in New Orleans, there's a map that comes up on your phone and helps you locate stores, etc. But how invasive is that? In the research world, we really have ethical questions about using AI data to track people and to engage with them in ways that they may not know we're doing. So that's an overview of the research methods presented in Chapter 8. I would like to remind you that we already looked at the Dictionary of Public Relations Research and Evaluation that Don Stacks and I edited, the 3rd edition that's online as a free resource. It defines numerous terms related to research and measurement, but your chapter in the book goes into great detail on how those terms are used for a public relations management initiative, and I hope that this information has proven insightful. I used to work in a research firm. That's my professional background, so if I can answer any questions for you, please let me know, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.